True stories of parallel universe experiences that will shock you. There are many stories exist where people claim to have experienced strange occurrences that could be interpreted as glimpses into another reality, including individuals appearing in the wrong place, encountering people who look exactly like them but with different lives, which some theorize could be a crossover from a parallel timeline. However, these stories are often difficult to verify and may have alternative explanations. Joffer Voren. In 1851 in Frankfurt an der Oder, a very confused man was wandering about town. He seemed to not know where he was, and when German officials decided to ask him where he was from, he said, in very broken German, that he was from Laxaria. No one had heard of this country, so they asked what continent it was on. He replied Sacria, which baffled authorities even more. Officials continued to ask about the strange land. The man, who was identified as Joffer Voren, did not understand any European languages officials spoke to him, with a small exception for extremely broken English. Neither Laxaria nor Sacria are known to exist. He continued to say that he spoke and wrote Laxarian and Abramian languages, with Laxarian being a language spoken only by clerics, and Abramian being the more common language. He also insisted that he was Christian, more specifically, Epatian. No one has heard of this form of Christianity. He claimed that he was in Germany to find a long-lost relative, and that he was shipwrecked. He couldn't trace his itinerary on any map that was given to him, but insisted that Laxarians knew about all 5 compartments of Earth. He called the compartments, which may be continents, Sacria, Asler, Ausler, Aflar, and Upler. Soon after he was interrogated, the confused and scared man disappeared, never to be heard from again. Caspar Hauser story. A young man who mysteriously appeared in the German city of Nuremberg in 1828, claiming to have spent his entire life confined in a dark cell, completely isolated and unable to speak or interact with others, his sudden emergence, lack of basic social skills, and a mysterious letter detailing his alleged imprisonment captivated the public, leading to speculation about his identity and a life shrouded in mystery, ultimately ending in his assassination in 1833, leaving his origins and the truth behind his isolation unanswered. Where did this man come from? Was it even our world? The disappearance of William Cantello. Most of the disappearances and appearances on this list seem to be done spontaneously, but if historical records are correct, at least one instance of interdimensional travel was done on purpose. An eccentric inventor by the name of William Cantello was working on his newest invention, a rapid-firing machine gun. Cantello had told his sons that he was going to go to the market to sell it, and that was the last anyone ever saw of him. A private investigator suggested that Cantello could have gone to America, but that too was difficult to prove. The mystery gets a bit stranger after about 20 years, when an American man by the name of Hiram Maxim invented a rapid-firing machine gun by the name of the Maxim gun. Maxim bore an uncanny resemblance to the missing inventor, so much so that Cantello's sons actually mistook Maxim for their father. To make things even more bizarre, Hiram Maxim claimed in his autobiography that there was a man who was impersonating him. This suggests that Maxim might have been dealing with the flack from being mistaken for Cantello for quite some time. Could it be that Hiram Maxim was the alternate history version of William Cantello? Many have suggested this to be the case. The cabin in Peru. Peru's Marcahuasi stone forest has been reputed to be a doorway to another dimension for centuries. It's to be expected, considering how many of the stone formations have eerie resemblances to human faces, religious symbols, and more. It's also known for having travelers who journey there, never to be seen again. According to Dr. Raul Centeno, one woman decided to brave the forest with friends, despite being warned about strange disappearances in the area. She and her friends on the trip saw a strange cabin in the middle of the stone forest, and could hear people having a party inside. They looked inside the cabin's windows, and saw that they were dressed in 17th-century clothing. Entranced by the strange revelers, the woman had tried to enter the cabin. She was halfway in before her friends pulled her back out. Almost immediately, she realized that she was paralyzed on the side of her body that had entered the strange cabin. Dr. Sinento diagnosed her with hemiplegia, and suggested that her quick trip into another dimension may have permanently altered her nervous system. Pedro Oliva Ramirez. Pedro Oliva Ramirez also reportedly took a wrong turn through another universe, but this time in Spain, in November of 1986. Ramirez was on his usual route home from work in the city of Seville, when he passed by an odd and previously unknown part of the road. An instantly peculiar six-lane highway that he definitely didn't recognize. Along the side of this new road were tall buildings that Ramirez had never seen before, despite traveling that way most days. It gets stranger, though, because Ramirez then reportedly felt a hot and distinct temperature change in his car, and he heard a series of voices, allegedly informing him that he had been transported to a different hemisphere. Unsure of how to proceed, the story typically continues that Ramirez drove until he came to an intersection with signs pointing in three directions. Taking one of the roads, and believing he was headed back to Seville, Ramirez was apparently amazed when his car came to a stop. He glanced out of his window, and found he was parked right in front of his home where he had been trying to get to all along. It's said that a confused Ramirez then tried to retrace his steps several times, but he could never find his way back to that six-lane highway. So how did he get home, and who were the voices that spoke to him through his car? To this day, it's a mystery. Green-skinned children of Woolpit. The Green Children of Woolpit are two of history's most enigmatic visitors, as well as the oldest tale of interdimensional travel known. Dating back to the 12th century, the story says that two children were discovered on the outskirts of Woolpit, Great Britain. Unlike most children, these kids had one feature that really stood out: green skin. As soon as farmers found them, they began to cry in panic. The children were taken back into Woolpit and given food and drink. At first, they refused to eat. One child, a boy, refused to eat and starved to death. The other, a girl, began to eat uncooked beans. Slowly but surely, her skin began to return to a normal color. She wasn't able to speak the language, so it took a while to learn. Once she learned to speak English, she told an amazing story. The green girl claimed that she and her brother came from a place called St. Martin's Land, which was always in a state of darkness. Everyone there lived underground and had green skin. She also said that across a river was another luminous civilization. She said that they had come upon a cave and decided to explore. They ended up walking until they found Woolpit. When they looked back, the cave had disappeared. Most people who believe in the story agree that these two kids came from an alternate universe or dimension. What else could it be? A wedding from another universe. A 17-year-old girl told this story, which she remembered from when she was 9 years old. She walked down the aisle as a flower girl at her aunt's wedding, though her trip to another dimension started after the wedding. In the car on the way to the reception, she fell asleep. When she woke up, everything was different. Her dress was light orange instead of dark blue, and the entire theme of the wedding had changed. She thought simply everyone had changed for the party and had fun. To this day, all the photos and everything of the wedding and the reception are all orange. Did she start a new life in an alternate universe in that car? Would she want to go back to the other one if she could? Same, but different. When driving to San Bernardino, a woman says she came upon a sign for her hometown, Riverside, California. She decided on a whim to visit the place, but it looked different. She couldn't find her own house. Even the cemetery where her grandparents were had disappeared. University Avenue, normally very lively, was unkempt and abandoned. She tried for hours to find something familiar and started to fear she might be stuck there if she talked to anyone. She left feeling confused and disoriented. Years later, when she returned to bury her father in that same cemetery, everything was back to normal. So what happened to the old forgotten town? It's probably out there somewhere in another dimension. The Man from Taured. A bizarre incident allegedly occurred in 1954 at Tokyo's Haneda Airport, where a man arrived with a passport from a country called Taured, which does not exist on any map. The customs officers were baffled when he insisted that Taured was a real country, located between France and Spain, where Andorra exists. His passport, stamps, and official documents all appeared authentic but untraceable to any known nation. After several hours of investigation, officials placed him in a guarded hotel room overnight, but by morning, he had vanished without a trace, along with all his documents. While skeptics suggest this story might be an urban legend, some believe this could be an example of a person accidentally crossing over from a parallel universe with slight geographical differences. The 1860 painting by Austrian artist Ferdinand Georg Waldmüller. It seems to depict a woman holding and looking down at an iPhone. On a closer look, art experts revealed that the alleged iPhone in the painting was just a book, painted from a very misleading angle. The story of Rudolf Fentz is another one of those urban legends that goes back to the 1950s. It claims that in 1951, in New York City, a man dressed in 19th-century clothes was hit by a car. He was identified as Rudolf Fentz, but the problem was that he was reported to be missing since 1876. The items he was carrying also suggested he jumped from 1876 to 1951 directly. Sadly, for this one too, these events never actually happened in real life. They just originated from a science fiction book of the 1950s. The Time-Traveling Hipster, 1941. A photograph from 1941 shows a man wearing modern-style sunglasses and clothing in an era when such fashion was not common. This image, often called the time-traveling hipster, has fueled speculation about visitors from the future. This photo was snapped in 1941 at the reopening ceremony for the South Fork Bridge in British Columbia. If you look carefully, on the right-hand side you can see an unusually dressed man in what appears to be modern clothing, sporting sunglasses at a time when most were wearing hats and smart jackets. A man holding an iPhone, 1940. A 1940s photo sparked intrigue online as it appeared to show a man holding an iPhone. The picture, taken on a beach, shows a man, dressed in time-appropriate clothing walking through the crowd and looking at some sort of device in his hands. People were fast to assume time travel was the only possible explanation, but that's not the case. He was most likely looking down at another object, but it's difficult to see because of the quality of the picture. True experiences, stories of people who seem to change universes. The disappearing building. One Reddit user shared a story about walking home from work one evening and noticing a small bookstore on the corner of the street. The store had a warm glow, an old-fashioned sign, and an inviting atmosphere. The next day, when they tried to visit, the bookstore was gone, and multiple locals insisted that no such store had ever existed in that location. The man who woke up in a different life. A well-documented case involves a man who woke up one morning to find subtle yet unsettling changes in his life. His apartment had furniture he didn't recognize, his girlfriend claimed they had been dating for years, when he remembered only a few months, and even his job details seemed slightly off. Medical tests showed no signs of memory loss or psychological issues. Some believe he accidentally shifted into an alternate timeline where his life played out slightly differently. The woman who returned to a different reality. A woman reported returning from a short vacation to find that her apartment keys no longer worked. When she knocked, a completely different person answered, claiming they had been living there for years. The woman's workplace still recognized her, but her co-workers remembered different versions of past events than she did. To this day, she believes she may have slipped into a nearly identical, but slightly altered, universe. The missing time incident. A man and his friend were driving late at night when they took a wrong turn onto a quiet, unfamiliar road. Suddenly, the radio cut out, their GPS failed, and they both felt extremely drowsy. The next thing they knew, they woke up still driving, but they had lost 2 full hours with no recollection of what happened. The strangest part? Their car had traveled over 100 miles, even though neither of them remembered the journey.